There are moments at night when your body finally rests, but your inner world does not. The house is quiet, the phone is face down, the day has let go of you. And yet, inside, something is still awake. It feels like standing in front of a door that has not opened yet, even though you can sense light on the other side. There is a strange pressure in your chest, not quite anxiety, not quite sadness, more like a knowing, a silent awareness that your life is meant to move into something wider than the patterns you keep waking up to. You have not been careless with your life. You have tried. You have reflected. You have learned. You have watched the videos, read the books, repeated the affirmations, adjusted your thinking, held on to hope with quiet determination. And still, when the world goes quiet at night, the same question returns, almost like a whisper you did not invite. What am I missing? If that question lives in you, tonight I want to slow this moment down with you, because the most important thing you need to hear right now is not another technique, not another explanation, not another thing to fix. You are not broken. You are not late. You are not missing some secret ingredient that others were given and you were denied. The heaviness you feel is not failure pressing down on you. It is expansion pressing outward. And expansion always creates pressure before it creates space. Most people are taught to interpret this feeling as proof that something is wrong. But that interpretation comes from an old lens, one that equates effort with worth and struggle with progress. Through that lens, if nothing is moving on the outside, the mind assumes something must be lacking on the inside. But there is another way to understand what is happening to you. Sometimes life pauses not because you are stuck, but because something deeper is reorganizing. Like a river that appears still at the surface, while powerful currents shift beneath, preparing to change its course. The pause is not punishment, it is preparation. You see, authentic transformation does not happen through force. It does not arrive because you pushed harder, believed louder, or disciplined yourself into submission. Real change arrives when something inside you loosens its grip enough to receive what has been waiting all along. Right now, your consciousness is tired, not because you are weak, but because you have been carrying a version of yourself that no longer fits. Old beliefs about what you deserve, old stories about how life works, old limits that once felt necessary, maybe even protective. You have outgrown those containers, but you have not set them down yet. And that creates friction. It creates fatigue. It creates that strange sense of being close to something without being able to touch it. This is why your motivation feels inconsistent. This is why manifesting feels unstable. You are trying to build a new life, using blueprints designed for an earlier version of you. Here is something most people are never told. Your subconscious does not respond to how hard you try. It responds to what feels safe. It responds to what feels familiar. It responds to patterns that have been repeated long enough to feel like home, even when that home was uncomfortable, even when it was painful. If waiting has been normal for you, your system learns to wait. If struggle has been familiar, your system learns to struggle. If being close but not quite there has been your pattern, your system keeps recreating that edge, not to punish you, to protect you. Your mind believes it is keeping you safe by staying within what it knows. This is why forced positivity fades. This is why willpower eventually collapses. This is why you can want something deeply and still feel blocked from receiving it. The obstacle is not outside you. It is an outdated program still running quietly beneath your awareness. Your life does not unfold based on what your conscious mind desires. It unfolds based on what your nervous system expects. Those expectations shape what you notice and what you overlook, what feels possible and what feels unrealistic, what you move toward and what you unconsciously avoid. Right now, your entire system may still be calibrated to an earlier version of you. The version that had to stay guarded, the version that learned caution as survival, the version that was taught not to reach too far, not to relax too fully, not to trust too deeply. But that version is not who you are anymore. The restlessness you feel, the impatience, the quiet insistence that there must be more than this, those are not flaws in you. They are signals of misalignment. And misalignment only shows up when growth is already underway. There is a reason this awareness tends to surface at night. As the body becomes tired, the defenses soften. The analytical mind loosens its grip. The inner critic grows quieter. you begin to slip into a threshold state, the space between waking and sleeping, where the subconscious becomes more receptive. This is not mystical language. It is how the brain works. In this state, your consciousness moves into slower rhythms, similar to deep meditation. The barrier between intention and programming thins. This is why what you take in before sleep carries so much weight. Your system is not arguing anymore. It is listening. And in this moment, you do not need to battle yourself. You do not need to convince. You do not need to repair anything. You only need to allow a new instruction to land gently. Many people misunderstand manifestation as pulling things toward them through effort, focus, and force. But manifestation works in the opposite direction. It is not about grabbing. It is about releasing the resistance that has been quietly pushing things away. The more tension you hold, the more life resists meeting you. The more your system relaxes into trust, the more naturally reality begins to move toward you. Like two currents meeting in the middle once the struggle stops. This is why breakthroughs often arrive when you stop striving. Not because effort is wrong, but because surrender carries its own intelligence. You were never meant to exist in perpetual tension. You were never meant to chase alignment. Alignment emerges when you stop fighting yourself. Your task right now is not to do more. It is to allow a new baseline to form. A baseline where support is expected, where ease is not suspicious, where progress feels organic rather than forced. For many people, ease feels dangerous. Somewhere along the way, they learned that if things feel too smooth, something must be wrong. They learned that rest has to be earned, that peace requires justification, that good outcomes must be paid for through struggle. So when life begins to flow, the system panics. It manufactures problems. It creates drama. It tightens again. Not because it wants suffering, but because suffering feels familiar. But what if ease is not a warning sign? What if ease is the frequency of alignment? Think about nature. A tree does not strain to grow. It does not argue with the sun or negotiate with the rain. It simply receives what it needs and allows its inherent intelligence to unfold. Growth happens because resistance is absent, not because effort is excessive. You are no different. Within you exists a natural blueprint for expansion, a quiet intelligence that knows how to move you toward your fullest expression. But unlike the tree, you were conditioned to doubt that intelligence, to override it, to believe that nothing worthwhile comes without force. Tonight, as you begin to soften, you are not adding anything new to yourself. You are removing interference. You are letting go of the grip that has been holding back what was always meant to flow. If emotion rise, let it. If resistance appears, observe it gently. That is simply the old operating system noticing it is no longer in charge. You are safe. You are held. You are not behind. This is not the end of a struggle. It is the beginning of a different relationship with yourself. As you rest, allow this truth to settle quietly beneath your thoughts. You are allowed to experience ease now, not later, not after proof, not after perfection. Now, you do not need to understand how. Your system only needs to know that ease is no longer dangerous. And as that understanding takes root, something subtle begins to change. Not with noise, not with fireworks, but with a gentle shift in your baseline, a quiet recalibration, a sense that you no longer need to brace yourself against life. Transformation rarely announces itself. It integrates softly, like a tide changing direction, while the surface looks the same. Tonight, you are not doing nothing. You are allowing something essential to realign. Rest, let go, and trust that what feels like pressure is simply space learning how to open. 1. Ease is not a reward. It is your natural state. You were taught, quietly and repeatedly, not always with words but with tone, with expectations, with the emotional climate around you, that effort is the price of worthiness, and that rest must be earned through endurance. So over time, your body learned a very specific equation, one that says, comfort only comes after suffering, and peace only arrives when you are exhausted enough to deserve it. This teaching settles deeper than belief. It embeds itself into the nervous system, shaping how you interpret safety, value, and belonging, until striving becomes normal and ease feels suspicious, almost irresponsible. as if something bad must surely follow if you relax too much. So, when life begins to flow, when a door opens without resistance, when something aligns without you having to push, your system does not celebrate, it tightens, because it does not recognize this terrain as safe. The nervous system, designed to prioritize familiarity over fulfillment, scans the moment and whispers that something must be wrong, that ease is a trap, that vigilance is required, and almost automatically it begins to generate tension, doubts, complications, or new problems. Not because it wants suffering, but because it wants the known. Struggle feels like home to a system that was trained inside it. This is why so many people unknowingly sabotage moments of alignment, why they overthink good news, delay joyful decisions, or create unnecessary obstacles right when things begin to move. Because ease threatens the identity that was built around endurance. And identity, especially one forged through survival, resists being dismantled. What looks like self-sabotage from the outside is often self-protection from the inside. But here is the quiet truth that changes everything once it is truly understood. Ease is not a prize you win at the end of a long battle. It is the state your system naturally returns to when it no longer feels the need to defend itself. Ease is not laziness. It is coherence. Ease is not avoidance. It is alignment. Ease is what remains when resistance dissolves. Look at nature without the stories you were taught to project onto it, and something becomes very clear. Nothing alive is fighting to be alive. A tree does not wake up and strain itself into growth. It does not punish itself into producing leaves. It does not anxiously monitor its progress. It simply responds to the conditions around it, receiving sunlight, water, and nutrients, allowing the intelligence already within it to express itself fully. Growth happens not because of force, but because there is no internal argument against becoming what it already is. The river does not exhaust itself trying to reach the ocean. It moves because gravity and surrender are working together. And when it encounters an obstacle, it does not collapse into self-doubt. It flows around it, over it, or through it, without drama, without identity, without resistance. In nature, ease is not the absence of movement. It is movement without friction. You were born with that same intelligence, the same capacity to move toward your fullest expression without coercion. But along the way, you learn to override it, to distrust it, to believe that if you are not pushing, then you are failing. If you are not struggling, then you are falling behind. This belief does not live only in the mind. It lives in the body, in the muscles that never fully relax, in the breath that rarely deepens on its own, in the constant background tension that feels so normal you hardly notice it anymore. When your system has been conditioned this way for years, sometimes decades, stillness begins to feel like stagnation, and rest feels like vulnerability. So even when life offers you a pause, an opening, or a moment of grace, you do not fully receive it. You brace instead. You wait for the other shoe to drop. You hold your breath inside a moment that was meant to nourish you. This is not because you are ungrateful or incapable of joy. It is because your nervous system learned that relaxation once came with consequences. Perhaps when things were unpredictable, when safety was inconsistent, when being too at ease meant being unprepared. So it adapted in the only way it knew how, by staying alert, by staying tight, by staying in motion, even when motion was no longer necessary. What you are being invited into now is not a new philosophy, but a return to something older than all conditioning. A remembrance that ease is not something to achieve, but something to allow. This does not mean effort disappears from your life. It means effort is no longer fueled by fear. It does not mean challenges vanish. It means challenges no longer define your worth or dictate your sense of safety. Ease does not make you passive. It makes you receptive. It allows your perception to widen so you can notice opportunities that tension keeps hidden. It allows your creativity to come back online, because creativity does not thrive under pressure. It requires space, softness, and trust. It allows your intuition to speak clearly, because intuition cannot be heard over the noise of constant self-management. When you stop treating ease as something dangerous, your entire internal landscape begins to reorganize. The body starts to breathe differently. The mind becomes less rigid. The heart softens, and from that coherence, action arises naturally. Not forced, not frantic, but precise and timely, like a step that lands exactly where it needs to without calculation. This is why so many breakthroughs arrive after surrender, after exhaustion, after the moment you finally stop trying to control every outcome. Because control is not the same as power. True power comes from alignment, and alignment emerges when the nervous system feels safe enough to let go of defense. Ease is not the opposite of discipline. It is the foundation of sustainable movement. Ease is not giving up. It is giving over the struggle that was never required in the first place. Ease is not a destination. It is the ground beneath your feet once you stop running from yourself. If you listen carefully to your own experience, you may notice that the moments you remember as turning points were rarely the ones where you pushed hardest. They were the moments where something softened, where clarity appeared without force, where the right conversation, idea, or decision arose organically because you were finally receptive enough to see it. Those moments did not come because you earned them through suffering. They came because you stopped resisting what was already available. Learning to live from ease does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means releasing the belief that responsibility requires tension. You can be devoted without being harsh. You can be committed without being rigid. You can grow without punishing yourself into motion. This shift does not happen overnight, especially if your system has spent a lifetime equating struggle with safety. But it begins with permission. Not intellectual permission, but embodied permission. The kind that shows up when you allow your shoulders to drop without immediately correcting them. When you let a good moment be good without questioning it. When you notice yourself waiting for something to go wrong and gently choose not to follow that impulse. Each time you allow ease without interference, you send a new signal to your nervous system. A signal that says, this state is survivable. This state is allowed. This state does not require collapse or correction. Over time, those signals accumulate, and what once felt foreign begins to feel familiar, and what once felt unsafe begins to feel like home. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to the version of you that existed before struggle became your identity, before effort became your proof of worth, before rest felt like something you had to justify. Ease is not a luxury reserved for the fortunate. It is the natural rhythm of life when resistance is no longer mistaken for strength. And as you begin to understand this, not just with your mind, but with your body, something profound shifts. You stop bracing against life and start meeting it. You stop chasing alignment and allow it to emerge. You stop exhausting yourself trying to be enough and realize that you always were. Ease was never meant to be the reward at the end of the road. It was meant to be the way you walk it. 2. The nervous system decides the reality you are allowed to receive. Most people believe life responds to what they want, to what they visualize, to what they consciously intend. Yet experience quietly teaches a different lesson, one that only becomes obvious after years of trying, hoping, and wondering why certain patterns refuse to dissolve. Life does not organize itself around desire alone. It organizes itself around what your nervous system has been trained to expect. This distinction is subtle, but it changes everything once you truly see it. You may want peace, abundance, connection, or ease with your whole mind, but if your body has learned to associate safety with vigilance, tension, or waiting for the next problem, your system will quietly steer you back toward familiar terrain, not because it doubts your dreams, but because its primary function is survival, not fulfillment. Your nervous system is older than your ambitions. It developed long before language, logic, or long-term planning, and its only question has always been simple. Am I safe right now? When the answer is no, everything else becomes secondary. Creativity shuts down, curiosity fades. The ability to imagine new outcomes narrows until you are left operating from the smallest, most predictable version of yourself. This is why people often feel trapped even when opportunities exist, why they overlook doors that are already open, why they keep repeating choices that no longer serve them. It is not a lack of intelligence or effort. It is a nervous system calibrated for protection, scanning for threat, preparing for impact, bracing for disappointment. When the body enters survival mode, the world contracts. Attention narrows to what could go wrong. The mind becomes efficient but rigid, excellent at identifying problems, and terrible at perceiving possibility. In this state, Life can only rearrange itself using what is already known. New realities require openness, and openness requires safety. You may recognize this pattern in your own life. Moments when you were under pressure, overwhelmed, or emotionally guarded, and no matter how hard you tried to think positively, nothing seemed to move. Ideas felt flat, solutions felt distant. Even good news felt muted or suspicious. That is not because you failed to believe hard enough. It is because belief cannot override physiology. A nervous system that feels threatened will not allow expansion, no matter how beautiful the vision held in the mind. But something remarkable happens when the body begins to feel safe. The breath deepens naturally. The muscles soften without being told to relax. The mind becomes less defensive and more curious. Suddenly, awareness widens, and with it, the range of realities you are able to perceive and receive. In a state of safety, consciousness becomes fluid. You begin to notice subtleties you were blind to before. Opportunities register where previously there was only noise. Synchronicities feel less like miracles, and more like quiet confirmations that you are finally in rhythm with life. This is not imagination or wishful thinking. It is biology. When the nervous system shifts out of survival, blood flow returns to areas of the brain responsible for creativity, insight, and long-term vision. The system moves from defense into connection, from contraction into responsiveness. This is why telling someone to simply think more positively often fails. Positive thoughts cannot land in a body that is bracing for danger. Affirmations bounce off a nervous system that does not feel safe enough to receive them. The issue is not the thought. It is the state from which the thought is being offered. You do not need to become more optimistic. You need to become more regulated. This is a difficult truth for many people to accept because it reframes years of personal effort. It suggests that the work is not about pushing the mind to override the body, but about helping the body learn that the present moment is no longer an emergency, that it is allowed to soften, that it does not need to stay on guard to survive. For many, this is unfamiliar territory. If your early life involved unpredictability, emotional tension, or constant adjustment, your system may have learned that safety comes from staying alert. In those environments, vigilance was wisdom. Relaxation would have been naive. But strategies that once protected you can quietly limit you later. The nervous system does not automatically update itself just because circumstances change. It needs new evidence, consistent, gentle signals that say the threat has passed, that the ground beneath you is stable enough to rest on. This is where real transformation begins, not with dramatic declarations, but with small, repeated experiences of safety. Moments where you allow yourself to pause without guilt. Moments where you notice tension and choose not to justify it. Moments where you receive something good without immediately questioning how long it will last. Each of these moments sends a message deeper than words. They tell your nervous system that expansion is survivable. That ease does not require collapse. That calm is not the prelude to danger. As this message settles, your expectations begin to shift. Not consciously at first, but organically. You stop bracing for disappointment. You stop scanning for problems as your default orientation. And because expectation shapes perception, perception begins to reveal a different world. This is why two people can live in the same circumstances and experience entirely different realities. One sees obstacles everywhere. The other sees pathways. The difference is not intelligence or luck. It is the state of the nervous system through which life is being interpreted. When your system feels safe, reality opens. When it feels threatened, reality narrows. Understanding this removes a tremendous amount of self-judgment. It explains why effort alone did not work, why knowledge alone was not enough, why you could understand something intellectually and still feel unable to live it. Nothing was wrong with you. Your body was simply doing what it was designed to do. Now, as you begin to recognize this, the work becomes simpler, though not always easy. It asks you to listen to your body with the same respect you once reserved for your thoughts. It invites you to prioritize regulation over explanation, safety over strategy, presence over performance. This does not mean avoiding challenge or responsibility. It means meeting life from a state that can actually respond rather than react. It means allowing your system to come out of hiding so your consciousness can expand naturally. Over time, as safety becomes your baseline rather than your exception, your reality reorganizes itself. Not because you forced it to change, but because you are now able to receive what was always there but previously inaccessible. Doors you did not see begin to appear. Choices you once avoided feel possible. Life feels less like something to endure and more like something to engage. This is the quiet power of a regulated nervous system. It does not shout. It does not demand. It simply allows. And as you rest more fully in that allowance, you may notice something deeply reassuring. You do not have to chase the life you want. You only have to create the internal conditions that allow it to meet you. Safety is not the end goal. It is the foundation. From there, everything else can grow. 3. You are not lacking effort. You are carrying an old blueprint. The exhaustion you feel is often misunderstood, especially by people who have spent their lives trying, learning, adjusting, and holding themselves to an invisible standard that never seems to soften, because from the outside, it can look like a lack of motivation or clarity, when in truth, it is something far more subtle and far more human. What you are feeling is not weakness, and it is not a failure of discipline or will. It is the natural fatigue that comes from carrying structures that no longer fit the size of the life you have grown into. There is a particular kind of tiredness that does not come from doing too little, but from holding too much. A tiredness that settles into the bones rather than the muscles. One that sleep alone does not fully relieve, because it is not the body that is overworked. It is the inner architecture of how you relate to yourself and to life. You have not stopped moving forward. You have simply continued walking while still wearing a map that belongs to an earlier terrain. Over time, you accumulated beliefs that once made sense, stories that once helped you understand your place in the world, limits that once protected you from disappointment or pain, and none of these were wrong when they were formed, because at the time they served a purpose. They gave structure to uncertainty, meaning to chaos, and safety to moments when safety was not guaranteed. But growth has a quiet way of making old structures feel heavy rather than helpful, not because they suddenly became false, but because they are no longer aligned with who you are becoming. When you outgrow a belief, it does not announce its expiration. It simply starts to restrict you. When you outgrow a story, it does not disappear. It begins to feel cramped. When you outgrow a limit, it stops feeling protective and starts feeling suffocating. This is the source of the inner friction you are experiencing. The sense of pushing against something invisible. The feeling that no matter how much effort you apply, there is diminishing return, because effort is being spent not on creation, but on maintenance. You are maintaining an identity, a worldview, and a set of expectations that require constant energy to uphold, because they are no longer true reflections of your inner state. Many people respond to this discomfort by trying to add more knowledge, more techniques, more discipline, more structure, believing that the answer must be found in building something new on top of what already exists. But this only compounds the problem, because you cannot build freely while still carrying what no longer belongs. Expansion requires space, and space is created not by accumulation, but by release. This is one of the hardest lessons to accept, especially for those who have survived by effort, because letting go can feel like irresponsibility, as if putting something down means giving up or becoming careless, when in reality, it is an act of discernment, a recognition that what once supported you is now slowing you down. You are not being asked to abandon what shaped you, only to acknowledge that it no longer needs to shape your future. Think of it like carrying furniture through a doorway that is too narrow. The harder you push, the more resistance you meet, not because the doorway is wrong, but because the object no longer fits the space you are trying to move into. At some point, the only way forward is to set it down, not because it was useless, but because its usefulness has been fulfilled. The mind often resists this process because it has invested so much meaning in the old blueprint, and it whispers that if you let go of these beliefs, these stories, these limits, you will lose yourself, your identity, or the coherence of your life. But what actually happens is the opposite. What you lose is not yourself, but the weight you have been carrying in order to keep a smaller version of yourself intact. There is a particular grief that can arise in this phase, a quiet sadness that does not have a clear object, because part of you recognizes that you are being asked to release ways of seeing yourself that once made sense. ways of measuring success, safety, and belonging that once felt necessary. This grief is not a sign that you are moving backward. It is a sign that something inside you is ready to evolve. When you continue to operate from an old blueprint, life begins to feel like it requires constant effort just to maintain equilibrium, because you are trying to fit your present awareness into past parameters. And this mismatch shows up as fatigue, confusion, and a sense of being stuck. Even when movement is happening, you may notice that tasks feel heavier than they used to, decisions feel more draining, and progress feels oddly unsatisfying, as if each achievement costs more energy than it gives back. This is not because you are doing life wrong. It is because you are trying to do it the same way you always have, even though you are no longer the same person. Your internal system is asking for an update, not an upgrade through addition, but a refinement through subtraction. Letting go does not mean forgetting what you learned or dismissing what you endured. It means recognizing that you no longer need to carry those lessons in the same way, that wisdom can remain without the weight, that insight can stay without the armor. You can honor your past without letting it dictate your future. This is where many people become frightened, because without the old blueprint, there is a moment of not knowing, a space where certainty loosens and familiar reference points dissolve, and the mind interprets this as danger, even though it is actually possibility. The mind prefers an outdated map over no map at all. But life does not require you to know every step in advance. It only asks that you stop clinging to directions that no longer lead where you want to go. You do not need to construct a new identity right now. You do not need to define who you are becoming. You simply need to notice what feels heavy and allow yourself to question whether it still belongs. Sometimes the most profound shift happens not when you decide what to pursue, but when you decide what you no longer need to defend, explain, or carry. When you stop proving your worth through effort. When you stop repeating stories about limitation that once kept you safe, but now keep you small. When you stop enforcing boundaries that were built for survival rather than growth. This is not a dramatic act, and it does not require a single defining moment. It happens quietly, through small choices, through moments where you notice resistance and choose not to push through it, through pauses where you allow yourself to rest without justification, through decisions where you follow what feels lighter rather than what feels familiar. As you begin to set these things down, something unexpected occurs. Energy returns, not as excitement or adrenaline, but as steadiness, clarity, and a deeper sense of alignment. You realize that much of your effort was not being used to move forward, but to hold yourself in place. When that effort is released, movement becomes natural again. You were never meant to carry every version of yourself forever. Growth requires that certain layers fall away, not because they were wrong, but because they have done their job. The blueprint that once helped you navigate the world has brought you to the edge of something new, and now it is asking to be retired with respect, rather than dragged into a future it was not designed for. You are not behind because you are tired. You are tired because you have outgrown what you are still holding. And the moment you begin to place those old structures gently on the ground, without judgment or urgency, you create the space necessary for a new way of being to emerge, one that does not require constant effort to sustain, one that moves with life rather than against it. You do not need to build more. You need to trust that what you are becoming no longer requires what you once had to carry. 4. Attention is the invisible architect of your life. There is a force shaping your life far more quietly than effort, belief, or even intention. And because it operates so subtly, most people never realize how decisive it truly is, even as it influences nearly every experience they have. That force is attention, not the dramatic kind that strains or concentrates, but the gentle, continuous placement of awareness that follows you through each moment of the day, often without your consent or your noticing. Where your attention rests, energy gathers. Where energy gathers, experience takes form. This is not philosophy meant to sound profound. It is something you can verify in your own life by observing where your awareness naturally drifts when nothing is demanding it. If your attention is consistently drawn to what has not arrived yet, your life begins to feel like waiting. If your attention repeatedly returns to how close you are but not quite there, existence organizes itself around that almost, keeping you suspended in anticipation without arrival. Not because reality is cruel, but because consciousness responds more faithfully to what you observe than to what you declare. Most people believe their thoughts are the problem, and they exhaust themselves trying to control them, argue with them, or replace them with better ones. But thoughts are not the true drivers here. Thoughts arise and dissolve on their own. Attention is what gives them weight. Attention is what turns passing ideas into lived experience. You can think a discouraging thought and move on without consequence, but when your attention lingers there, revisits it, checks it, measures life against it, energy accumulates, and momentum builds. Over time, this momentum begins to feel like reality itself, even though it began as a habit of focus. This is why people often feel trapped in patterns they intellectually understand, but cannot escape. They may know they are not truly stuck, yet their attention keeps returning to evidence of stagnation. They may believe in possibility, yet their awareness continually scans for confirmation of delay. And consciousness, ever responsive, continues to create from the signal it receives most consistently. Attention functions like a beam of light. Where it shines, details sharpen. Where it does not, entire landscapes remain unseen. If you shine that beam again and again on absence, you experience absence as dominant. If you shine it on struggle, struggle becomes familiar. If you shine it on waiting, life organizes itself around waiting. This does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means your attention has been trained, often long ago, often for reasons that once made sense. For many people, especially those who grew up needing to stay alert, attention became a survival tool. Scanning for problems kept them safe. Anticipating what might go wrong helped them adapt. Noticing what was missing motivated them to keep moving. Over time, this orientation became automatic, so automatic that it feels neutral, even responsible. But what once protected you can quietly limit you. An attention trained to detect threat does not naturally recognize opportunity. An awareness calibrated for vigilance cannot easily rest in trust. And without trust, expansion remains theoretical rather than lived. You may have noticed this dynamic in subtle ways. Moments when something positive occurred, and your attention immediately moved to what could undermine it. Times when progress appeared, and your awareness shifted to how fragile it felt. Instances when support arrived, and your focus moved to how long it might last. These reactions are not personal failures. They are conditioned reflexes. Attention learned to move this way because it believed it had to. The quiet power of attention lies in the fact that it does not need to be forcefully redirected to change. It only needs to be guided, gently, repeatedly, without self-criticism. You do not need to dominate your mind. You do not need to eliminate thoughts. You do not need to convince yourself of anything extraordinary. You only need to notice where your attention goes when you are not consciously choosing it, and then offer it another place to rest. This is not an act of denial. It is an act of selection. Imagine walking through a crowded room filled with conversations. You do not have to silence the room to listen to a different voice. You simply turn toward it. The others fade into the background on their own. Attention works the same way. When you stop feeding a particular narrative with sustained focus, it begins to lose its grip, not because you fought it, but because you stopped nourishing it. This is why trying to force positive thinking often backfires. Force keeps attention locked on the very thing you are trying to escape. Gentle redirection, on the other hand, allows attention to disengage without resistance. You might notice your awareness drifting toward impatience and quietly shift it toward the sensation of your breath. You might catch yourself rehearsing what is missing and choose instead to notice what is present, not as a gratitude exercise, but as a grounding one. You might recognize your mind looping around timing and gently return your focus to the simple fact that you are here, breathing, supported in this moment. These shifts may feel insignificant at first, almost too subtle to matter, but attention does not require dramatic gestures to change direction. It responds to consistency, not intensity. Each time you redirect attention, you weaken the old pathway and strengthen a new one. Each time you choose not to dwell on waiting, you step out of waiting, if only briefly. Each time you stop feeding the story of almost, you create space for arrival. Over time, these small choices compound. Your internal environment changes. Your expectations soften. And because attention shapes perception, perception begins to reveal a different reality. You start noticing opportunities that were always there but invisible to a contracted focus. You begin sensing movement, where before there was only stagnation. You experience moments of ease, not because life suddenly transformed, but because you are no longer filtering everything through the same narrow lens. This is not about pretending everything is fine. It is about allowing attention to rest somewhere that does not reinforce the very patterns you wish to outgrow. Attention does not need certainty to move. It only needs permission. When you stop demanding proof before allowing your awareness to soften, you create a new signal. A signal that says the present moment does not need to justify itself. That waiting is not your identity. That almost is not your destination. From this place, something unexpected happens. Life feels less like something you are monitoring and more like something you are participating in. You respond instead of react. You notice instead of brace. And reality, sensitive as it is to where consciousness rests, begins to reorganize around this new orientation. The most profound shifts in life often begin here, not with a decision to change everything, but with a willingness to guide attention differently, not aggressively, not dramatically, but with the patience of someone who understands that awareness, like water, follows the channels it has been given, and that new channels are formed through gentle persistence. You are not required to control your thoughts to change your life. You are not required to monitor every emotion. You are only invited to notice where your attention has been living, and to consider whether it still needs to live there. As you practice this, you may find that waiting loses its hold. That almost begins to dissolve. That movement appears without effort, not because you forced reality to respond, but because you stopped telling it, again and again, that nothing had arrived yet. Attention has always been shaping your life. Now, you are simply learning to guide it with care. 5. Before sleep, the door to the subconscious opens. There is a moment each night that most people pass through without realizing how powerful it is. A moment when the weight of the day finally begins to fall away, when the body grows heavy and the mind loses its sharp edges, and in that quiet softening, something essential becomes available again. This moment is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It arrives simply as tiredness, as the feeling that you no longer have the energy to hold everything together. When you are tired, the analytical mind retreats. The part of you that questions, evaluates, corrects, and argues loosens its grip. The ego, which spends the day defending identity and managing appearances, begins to relax, not because it has surrendered consciously, but because it no longer has the strength to maintain control. This is not a weakness. This is an opening. In this state, your brain naturally shifts into slower rhythms, often referred to as theta, the same state accessed in deep meditation, hypnosis, and the early years of childhood. It is a state where the boundary between conscious intention and subconscious programming becomes thin, where information is absorbed rather than analyzed, where suggestion lands not as an idea to debate but as a signal to integrate. This is why what you experience before sleep carries such weight. Your system is not sorting, filtering, or resisting in the same way it does during the day. It is listening, it is receiving, it is updating. Most people unknowingly use this window to reinforce old patterns. They replay the day's disappointments. They rehearse what did not work. They drift into sleep wrapped in worry, self-criticism, or unfinished conversations. And the subconscious, open and impressionable, takes this as instruction, quietly reinforcing the same expectations for tomorrow. Not because it wants you to struggle, but because it is doing exactly what it was designed to do, recording what feels important, what feels emotionally charged, what appears to define reality. But this same window can be used differently, not through effort or concentration, but through gentleness. Before sleep, you do not need to convince yourself of a better future. You do not need to argue with doubt or overpower resistance. In fact, doing so only wakes the analytical mind again and closes the door you are trying to pass through. Instead, you are invited to speak to your system in the simplest language it understands. Not logic, not explanation, but feeling-toned truth, a quiet statement, a soft instruction, a sentence that does not demand belief, only allowance. I am allowed to experience ease now. This sentence is not meant to be dissected. It is not meant to be proven. It is not meant to be defended. It is meant to be heard. When whispered gently in a tired body, it bypasses the part of the mind that wants to debate whether ease is deserved or realistic, and it reaches the deeper layers where permission is either granted or withheld. It speaks directly to the nervous system, to the part of you that decides what is safe to receive. For many people, ease feels threatening at a subconscious level. It is associated with vulnerability, with letting the guard down, with moments in the past when relaxation was followed by disappointment or loss. So when life begins to soften, the system tightens, not out of malice, but out of memory. Before sleep, however, that memory loosens its hold. The defenses that normally keep you alert begin to fade. This is why a single sentence, offered with sincerity and without force, can reach places that years of effort could not. You may not feel anything dramatic when you repeat it. You may notice a subtle release in the chest, or a deeper breath, or nothing at all. All of these responses are valid. The subconscious does not require sensation to register change. It requires repetition and safety. What matters is not how strongly you feel the statement, but that you allow it to pass through without resistance, that you let it be there, like a seed resting in soil, not forced to grow, simply given the conditions to take root. Over time, this practice begins to alter your baseline. Your system starts to learn that ease is not a threat, that rest does not lead to collapse, that support can exist even when you are not striving. This is how real change happens, not by overpowering old programs, but by gently introducing new information at a time when the system is most receptive. Think of it like updating a device while it is in rest mode rather than while it is running every application at once. During the day, your mind is busy maintaining identity, managing responsibility, and navigating complexity. At night, much of that activity winds down, and the deeper operating system becomes accessible. This is why children learn so quickly, why early experiences shape us so profoundly, and why habits formed before sleep tend to persist. The subconscious is not logical, it is associative. It learns through tone, repetition, and emotional safety. By offering yourself a message of permission at night, you are not forcing a new belief. You are creating a new association between rest and safety, between stillness and support, between ease and survival. For someone who has lived in effort for a long time, this is revolutionary. You are teaching your system that you do not need to earn rest, that you do not need to justify peace, that you do not need to remain alert in order to be okay. Night after night, this quiet practice begins to shift something fundamental. You may notice that you wake with less urgency, that your body feels less braced, that challenges feel more navigable, not because life suddenly became perfect, but because your internal state changed the way you meet it. This is the power of working with the subconscious rather than against it. You are not commanding it to change. You are inviting it to relax, and relaxation, contrary to what you may have been taught, is not the opposite of progress. It is the condition that allows progress to occur without tearing you apart in the process. Before sleep, you are closer to yourself than at almost any other time. The masks are heavy, the roles are quiet. What remains is something honest and receptive. In that honesty, a single truth, spoken softly, can travel far. I am allowed to experience ease now. You do not need to see immediate results. You do not need to measure progress. Trust that something is being heard beneath the surface. Because while you sleep, your system is listening, integrating, and reorganizing in ways your conscious mind does not need to supervise. This is not passive. It is deeply intelligent. And when you begin to work with this natural rhythm, rather than trying to dominate it, you discover that transformation does not always require effort. Sometimes it requires permission. 6. Identity keeps you where you are familiar, not where you are free. There is a quiet force shaping your life that most people never question, not because it is hidden, but because it feels so normal, it passes for truth. And that force is identity, the internal agreement about who you are that your subconscious works tirelessly to protect and maintain. Identity is not your name, your role, or your personality as you describe it to others. It is the silent story your nervous system believes about what kind of life is possible for you and what kind of life is not. The subconscious does not prioritize happiness, fulfillment, or expansion. It prioritizes familiarity. What feels known is interpreted as safe, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it limits you, even when it keeps you repeating the same cycles again and again. This is why people often remain loyal to identities that cause suffering, because suffering that is familiar feels less threatening than change that is unknown. If somewhere along the way you learn that you are someone who must always try harder, endure longer, or push through exhaustion to earn stability, your system will continue to recreate situations that require effort as proof of worth. Life will not do this to punish you, but to remain consistent with who you believe yourself to be. Identity becomes a filter, and everything that enters your experience is evaluated through one simple question. Does this match who we think we are? When something arrives that contradicts that identity, ease without effort, success without struggle, support without sacrifice, the subconscious hesitates. It may delay, distort, minimize, or even reject the experience entirely, not because it is undesired, but because it does not fit the internal image that has been carefully constructed over time. Consistency feels safer than growth to a system designed for survival. This is why breakthroughs often collapse at the very edge of arrival. The opportunity is real, the door is open, but stepping through would require you to become someone unfamiliar to yourself, someone who does not rely on struggle to feel real, someone who receives without apology, someone whose life works in ways you were not trained to recognize as normal. From the outside, this looks like self-sabotage. From the inside, it feels like disorientation, hesitation, or a vague sense that something is not quite right, even when everything appears to be aligning. The body pulls back, not because the moment is wrong, but because the identity is unprepared. This is one of the most painful and confusing places to be, because intellectually you may know you are ready for more, but emotionally and physically, something keeps you anchored to the old ground. That anchor is not fear of success in the abstract. It is fear of losing coherence, of no longer knowing who you are if the old struggle-based identity dissolves. The subconscious asks, if I am no longer the one who fights, endures, or survives, then who am I? And until that question is answered gently, without force, the system will choose the familiar over the free every time. This is where many people misunderstand identity change. They believe it requires pretending, affirming, or acting as if they are someone else. But this approach rarely works, because the subconscious is not persuaded by words alone. It is persuaded by evidence, by lived experience, by moments that are fully received rather than brushed aside. If you receive a compliment and immediately deflect it, you are reinforcing the identity that believes praise is unsafe or undeserved. If you receive support and rush to explain why it will not last, you are maintaining the identity that expects disappointment. If you experience progress and tell yourself it was luck, timing, or coincidence, you are protecting the identity that does not allow success to integrate. None of these reactions are conscious choices. They are habits of identity preservation. Identity is reinforced not by what happens to you, but by what you allow yourself to fully register. Experiences only update identity when they are acknowledged and absorbed. When they are minimized, dismissed, or rationalized away, the old identity remains intact, unchanged by new information. This is why affirmations alone rarely create lasting change. You can repeat statements of abundance, ease, or confidence countless times, but if your identity is anchored in scarcity, effort, or self-doubt, your subconscious will quietly find ways to maintain that narrative, not to punish you, but to preserve internal consistency. The shift begins when you stop trying to become someone new, and instead begin allowing yourself to recognize evidence of who you are already becoming. This is a subtle but profound distinction. You are not fabricating a future identity. You are acknowledging present moments that contradict the old one. Perhaps there was a moment recently when something worked out more smoothly than expected. Perhaps you made a choice that honored your well-being rather than your conditioning. Perhaps you received help without collapsing into guilt or explanation. These moments may seem small, but they carry enormous weight when they are consciously acknowledged. When you pause and allow yourself to feel them, to let them matter, you are giving your subconscious new data. You are saying, this happened, and it did not destroy me. This is part of who I am now. And slowly, quietly, identity begins to loosen. This process can feel uncomfortable, even disorienting, because identity change involves a form of loss. You are releasing a version of yourself that may have carried you through difficult seasons, that may have protected you when nothing else could. Gratitude and grief often coexist here, and both are appropriate. You are not betraying your past by evolving beyond it. You are honoring it by no longer requiring it to define your future. The phrase "you are upgrading yourself" is not metaphorical, it is literal. You are updating the internal operating system that determines what you expect, what you tolerate, and what you allow yourself to receive. Upgrades often feel unstable at first, because the system is recalibrating. But instability is not regression. It is transition. As the new identity begins to take shape, you may notice subtle changes. Your tolerance for dysfunction decreases. Your patience for unnecessary struggle fades. Your capacity to receive increases without effort. These shifts do not feel dramatic. They feel natural, like something finally clicking into place. You will also notice that life begins to respond differently, not because the universe is rewarding you, but because you are now collapsing different possibilities into experience. The identity you operate from determines which doors feel available, which conversations you enter, which environments you choose, and which opportunities you recognize as meant for you. This is not about becoming special or superior. It is about becoming congruent. When who you believe yourself to be aligns with what you are capable of receiving, life flows with less resistance. You are not losing yourself in this process. You are shedding the layers that were built for survival rather than expression. The essence of who you are does not disappear when identity shifts. It becomes more visible. If this feels unsettling at times, let it. Uncertainty is a sign that the old map no longer applies. You do not need a new one immediately. You only need to stop insisting on directions that no longer lead where you want to go. Identity change is not forced. It is allowed. It unfolds through permission, through recognition, through the quiet courage to let yourself be seen by yourself in a new way. You have spent enough time proving you can survive. Now, you are learning how to live. And that is not a loss of identity. It is its evolution. 7. A quantum shift does not accumulate. It happens when you allow. One of the most deeply misunderstood ideas about transformation is the belief that change must be earned through accumulation. That if you gather enough knowledge, apply enough techniques, repeat enough practices, or prove yourself through enough effort, then eventually something will tip and reality will be forced to respond. This belief feels logical, especially to a mind trained in linear cause and effect, but it does not reflect how real shifts actually occur, either in consciousness or in the deeper mechanics of reality itself. In quantum physics, a particle does not overcome a barrier by building strength over time. It does not push harder, gather momentum, or slowly chip away at resistance. Instead, there is a phenomenon where the particle simply appears on the other side of the barrier. When the possibility of being there becomes available, it does not conquer the wall. It tunnels through it. This is not poetic language. It is observed behavior. The particle does not need to prove it deserves to be on the other side. It does not need permission from the barrier. It does not need a strategy. The shift happens when the state of possibility changes. Your consciousness operates in a remarkably similar way. Most people spend years trying to push through internal barriers, trying to overpower doubt, outthink fear, outwork limitation, or convince themselves they are ready, believing that readiness comes after mastery. But readiness, at a deeper level, is not something you achieve. It is something you allow. The moment you accept a new state as possible for you, not as a fantasy, not as a future reward, but as a legitimate way of being now, the entire internal system reorganizes itself around that acceptance. This reorganization does not happen gradually in the way the mind expects. It happens suddenly, often invisibly, like a switch flipping beneath the surface. This is why so many people describe breakthroughs as sudden, even after long periods of apparent stagnation. From the outside, it looks like nothing was happening and then everything changed. From the inside, what actually happened was a shift in permission. A moment where the old identity loosened just enough to allow a new possibility to exist without being rejected. The work was never about gathering more tools. The work was about removing the internal veto. There is a quiet but persistent part of the psyche that decides what is allowed to be real for you. It operates beneath intention and belief. It does not ask what you want. It asks what you will accept. If ease has never been accepted as safe, it remains inaccessible no matter how much you desire it. If success has never been accepted as sustainable, it will appear briefly and then disappear. If peace has never been accepted as normal, it will feel temporary, fragile, or undeserved. This is not because you are doing something wrong. It is because the system is obeying the limits it has been given. A quantum shift occurs when you stop negotiating with those limits and quietly allow a different state to be valid, not through declaration, not through force, but through a subtle internal relaxation that says, "This is allowed now." This allowance is not intellectual, it is embodied. You may notice it as a release in the chest, a softening in the jaw, a deeper breath that arrives without effort. You may notice it as a moment of clarity where something that once felt impossible suddenly feels neutral. Not exciting, not frightening, just available. That neutrality is important. It signals that the nervous system is no longer resisting the possibility. Resistance is what keeps barriers intact. When resistance dissolves, barriers lose their function. This is why adding more techniques often delays the very shift you are seeking. Techniques imply that you are not there yet. They reinforce the identity of someone still preparing, still practicing, still almost ready. And consciousness responds faithfully to that signal, keeping you in preparation rather than arrival. This does not mean practices are useless. They serve a purpose when they help the system relax, regulate, and feel safe. But when they become a way of postponing permission, they quietly sustain the barrier instead of dissolving it. The most profound shifts often happen when people stop trying to change and instead stop refusing. They stop arguing with reality. They stop demanding proof. They stop insisting on understanding every step before taking none. They simply allow themselves to stand, internally, on the other side of the threshold, as if it is a place they are permitted to occupy. This allowance can feel uncomfortable at first, not because it is wrong, but because it contradicts an identity built around effort, endurance, and earning. If you have always known yourself as someone who struggles, existing without struggle can feel unreal, even unsafe. The mind may look for something to fix, something to improve, something to justify staying in motion. But this discomfort is not a sign to retreat. It is a sign that the old structure no longer has a job. Allowing does not mean pretending that challenges do not exist. It means no longer using challenge as the measure of legitimacy. It means understanding that life does not need to be difficult to be meaningful, and that growth does not require pain to be valid. When you allow yourself to exist on the other side as a legitimate state, something remarkable happens. Your choices begin to change without deliberation. Your attention shifts without effort. Your reactions soften without instruction. You stop behaving like someone trying to get there and start behaving like someone who is already there, not because you are acting, but because your internal reference point has changed. This is the essence of a quantum shift. It is not a reward at the end of a process. It is a change in state that redefines the process itself. You may not notice the moment it happens. There is rarely a dramatic marker. What you notice instead is the absence of something that used to be there. The constant tension, the background urgency, the need to prove or prepare. In its place is a quiet steadiness, a sense that you are no longer chasing life, but meeting it. From this state, action still happens, but it arises from clarity rather than compulsion. Effort still exists, but it is no longer fueled by fear. Movement continues, but it is guided rather than forced. This is why people who have experienced true shifts often struggle to explain how they happened. There is no sequence to describe, no formula to repeat, only a moment of allowing that change the rules of engagement. You do not need to accumulate more evidence that you are ready. You do not need to master yourself into worthiness. You do not need to break through anything. You need to allow the possibility that the other side of the barrier is not a future destination, but a present state you are permitted to inhabit. That permission does not come from outside you. It is not granted by time, achievement, or approval. It comes from the quiet decision to stop denying yourself what no longer needs to be withheld. When that decision lands, gently and honestly, the shift occurs, not as a spectacle, but as a recalibration. Life begins to respond differently, not because you forced it to change, but because you are no longer insisting on staying where you were. A quantum shift does not accumulate. It arrives the moment. Resistance releases, and allowance takes its place. And once it arrives, you do not become someone new. You simply discover that the version of you who lives on the other side was never missing. It was only waiting to be allowed. 8. Silence is not delay. It is integration. There are seasons in life when everything appears to slow down, when momentum fades, when progress becomes invisible. And for a mind trained to equate movement with value, this can feel unsettling, even frightening, because silence is often misinterpreted as failure, as if nothing happening means nothing is working. But silence is not absence. Silence is organization. There are moments when life does not ask you to act, decide, or push forward, but to pause, not as a test of patience, but as an invitation to allow something deeper to realign. These pauses do not arrive randomly. They arrive when the internal system has reached a point where more input would create confusion rather than clarity. Think of how the body functions after a long day. You do not continue processing information consciously while you sleep. Yet sleep is not wasted time. It is when integration occurs. Memories are sorted. Learning is consolidated. The nervous system recalibrates. The body repairs itself quietly, intelligently, without instruction. Consciousness works the same way. When your life slows down, when external movement pauses, when outcomes are temporarily hidden from view, it is often because your inner world is doing essential work that cannot be rushed or supervised. This is not a setback. It is a necessary phase of restructuring. Many people struggle here because they have learned to mistrust stillness. If nothing is happening, they assume something is wrong. If answers are not arriving, they believe they must search harder. If progress cannot be measured, they fear it does not exist. But not all progress is linear. Some progress is architectural. It happens beneath the surface, where the foundations are adjusted, the supports are reinforced, and the structure is prepared to hold more than it could before. If life continued to move forward while this work was happening, the system would collapse under its own weight. Integration requires space, and space requires silence. There is a difference between stagnation and stillness, though they can feel similar to an untrained perception. Stagnation is the absence of movement caused by resistance. Stillness is the absence of noise caused by alignment. One drains you, the other restores you. When silence arrives after a long period of effort, it is rarely an accident. It is often the body and consciousness saying, "We need time to absorb what has already been lived, learned, and endured." Without this absorption, growth becomes brittle. It looks impressive on the outside but fractures under pressure. This is why people sometimes experience collapse after periods of intense striving. They moved forward faster than their system could integrate. They accumulated experiences without digesting them. Eventually, the body calls for a pause, not to punish, but to protect. Integration is not passive. It is deeply active, though not visible. During these quieter phases, beliefs reorganize. Old identities loosen. New reference points begin to form. The nervous system updates its expectations based on accumulated experience rather than immediate outcome. If you have ever noticed that insights arrive not while you are trying to solve a problem, but while you are resting, walking, or doing something simple, you have already encountered this principle. The mind needed to step aside for understanding to surface. Silence creates the conditions for coherence. In silence, contradictions resolve themselves without argument. In silence, priorities reorder without force. In silence, what matters becomes clear without explanation. This is why periods of quiet often precede significant shifts, not because silence causes change, but because it allows change to integrate. The difficulty is that silence offers no reassurance. It does not tell you what is coming. It does not validate your effort. It does not provide milestones. It asks for trust, not in an outcome, but in the intelligence of the process itself. For someone who has survived by staying alert, silence can feel dangerous. The absence of stimulation may trigger anxiety. The lack of visible progress may awaken old fears of falling behind. The mind may rush to fill the quiet with worry, planning, or self-critique, simply to regain a sense of control. But control is not what is needed here. Permission is. Permission to not know. Permission to not act. Permission to not perform. Silence is the space where your system catches up with your life. If you have changed deeply over the past years, if you have questioned old beliefs, shed identities, faced discomfort, and allowed awareness to expand, then silence may be the natural response of a system reorganizing around a new center. The old ways of being no longer fit. The new ones are still forming. In between, there is quiet. This in-between space is uncomfortable precisely because it is unfamiliar. You cannot measure it. You cannot explain it. You cannot rush it. But it is fertile. In nature, the most important work often happens underground. Seeds break open in darkness. Roots spread where no one can see. Soil settles before new growth emerges. If you were to dig up a seed repeatedly to check if it was growing, you would destroy the very process you were hoping to confirm. The same is true for inner change. Constant checking, questioning, and evaluating disrupts integration. Silence protects it. This does not mean you disengage from life or withdraw completely. It means you stop demanding constant evidence that something is happening. It means you allow periods where your only task is to remain present without interference. Integration requires gentleness. During these phases, it can be helpful to simplify rather than add, to reduce stimulation rather than seek more, to listen more than you speak, to feel more than you analyze. Not because analysis is wrong, but because this stage does not respond to analysis. It responds to patience. If you are in a quiet season right now, if life feels slower, less dramatic, less urgent, consider the possibility that you are not being delayed, but prepared. Prepared to hold a different kind of experience, one that would not be sustainable without this internal reorganization. Silence also allows grief to surface and resolve. Grief for identities you are releasing. Grief for versions of yourself that no longer fit. Grief for dreams that have evolved into something else. These emotions do not always need to be named or processed actively. They need space. Silence gives them that space. In time, something shifts. You may not notice it immediately. You may simply wake one day with a different sense of orientation. Decisions feel clearer. Choices feel lighter. Your tolerance for noise, drama, and unnecessary struggle diminishes. This is integration expressing itself. The system has reorganized. The internal architecture has changed. And now, movement can resume, not from the same place as before, but from a deeper, more stable foundation. The mistake many people make is trying to escape silence too quickly, filling it with distractions, projects, or urgency, because they fear being left behind. But silence is not leaving you behind. It is bringing you into alignment with what is next. You are not required to understand what is happening in order for it to be working. Understanding often comes after integration, not before. Trusting silence does not mean surrendering responsibility. It means recognizing that not all responsibility is expressed through action. Some responsibility is expressed through restraint. Knowing when not to interfere is a form of wisdom that only comes from experience. If you have walked through darkness, if you have faced uncertainty, if you have questioned everything you thought you knew, then silence may be the place where those experiences finally settle into coherence. This settling is not passive, it is intelligent. Life does not always speak loudly. Sometimes it rearranges quietly, and when you allow that rearrangement to happen without interruption, you may find that what emerges is not a dramatic breakthrough, but a steady sense of readiness, a feeling that something has clicked into place without fanfare. That is integration. Silence is not asking you to wait. It is asking you to trust that what has already been lived is being woven into something that can support the next movement. Nothing is missing. Nothing is late. Nothing is wrong. If you cannot see what is happening, it may be because the most important work is happening where visibility is not required. Let the silence do its work. When it is complete, movement will return on its own, clear, grounded, and unforced. And you will realize that what felt like a pause was actually the moment everything came together. 9. You do not need certainty. You only need to stop resisting. There is a deep conditioning most of us carry, one that was formed early and reinforced often. which says that safety comes from knowing, that peace is found in answers, and that stability requires clarity before movement. So we learn to chase certainty as if it were a shield against disappointment, confusion, or loss. We are taught, subtly and repeatedly, that if we can just understand what is happening, predict what will come next, and secure a clear outcome, then we can finally relax, finally trust, finally move forward without fear. But certainty does not do what we think it does. Certainty closes. It narrows perception. It limits possibility to what the mind can already imagine. When you demand certainty before allowing yourself to move, to open, or to receive, you unknowingly reduce the field of what can reach you, because the mind can only be certain about what it already knows, and what it already knows is shaped by the past. Certainty feels comforting because it is familiar, but familiarity is not the same as truth, and it is not the same as alignment. Uncertainty, on the other hand, has been misunderstood and unfairly feared. We associate it with chaos, instability, or danger, not because it is inherently harmful, but because we were never taught how to be with it without collapsing into anxiety. So we resist it, avoid it, try to eliminate it as quickly as possible, believing that once uncertainty is gone, life will finally cooperate. But uncertainty is not the enemy of creation. Certainty is. When you are certain about how things must unfold, when you cling to a specific outcome, timeline, or explanation, you unintentionally close yourself off from solutions that exist outside your current frame of reference. You reduce the intelligence of life to the limits of your own perspective, and while that perspective may be informed and thoughtful, it is still partial. Life is far more creative than certainty allows. Uncertainty, when met without resistance, opens a field of potential that certainty cannot access. It creates space for outcomes you did not plan, answers you could not predict, and alignments you would never have designed from the mind alone. This is not mystical thinking. It is a recognition that reality is not linear, and that the most meaningful shifts often arrive from directions you were not looking. The problem is not uncertainty itself. The problem is how tightly we tense against it. When you resist uncertainty, the body contracts, the breath shortens, the mind accelerates, searching desperately for control. In that contracted state, perception narrows and possibility fades, not because it no longer exists, but because you cannot see it through the tension. When you stop resisting uncertainty, something very different happens. The body softens, the nervous system settles, awareness widens. This softening is not giving up. It is not passivity. It is responsiveness. There is an important distinction here that often gets overlooked. Not resisting uncertainty does not mean liking it, wanting it, or pretending you are comfortable when you are not. It means allowing it to exist without immediately trying to resolve it. It means staying present with the not knowing without turning it into an emergency. This is not blind belief. It is not spiritual bypassing. It is the maturity to recognize that some things unfold best when they are not forced into premature clarity. Think about moments in your life when the most important changes occurred. Often, they did not come when you had everything figured out. They came when something loosened, when you stopped demanding answers, when you allowed yourself to move forward without certainty, guided more by a sense of alignment than by a detailed plan. Those moments were not reckless. They were receptive. Certainty seeks control. Receptivity invites collaboration. When you insist on knowing exactly how something will happen before allowing it to happen, you place yourself in opposition to the natural intelligence of life. You say, in effect, that only what you can predict is acceptable. And life, sensitive to the state of consciousness you bring to it, responds by staying within those narrow bounds. But when you soften your grip, when you stop insisting on immediate answers, when you allow the unknown to remain open without tension, reality has room to respond in ways that surprise you, not because you were lucky, but because you were available. This availability is what people often mistake for faith, but it is not belief in a specific outcome. It is trust in the process of unfolding itself. Trust does not require certainty. It requires presence. When you are present, you do not need to know the whole path. You only need to sense the next step, and sensing requires a relaxed awareness, not a rigid demand. The mind wants closure because closure feels like safety. The body wants regulation, because regulation feels like survival. But the deeper self, the part of you that has moved through darkness and learned resilience, understands that growth often happens in spaces where answers are incomplete and clarity arrives gradually. If you look closely, you may notice that your greatest suffering has not come from uncertainty itself, but from your resistance to it. The tension of needing to know, the urgency of demanding answers, the exhaustion of trying to force clarity before it is ready to appear. When you release that urgency, even slightly, the quality of your experience changes. You feel less pressured, less frantic, more grounded in the present moment, where life is actually happening. This is what it means to soften consciousness. A softened consciousness does not abandon discernment. It abandons rigidity. It allows questions to exist without immediately converting them into problems. It allows waiting to be a space of listening rather than a space of fear. It allows movement to arise organically rather than being pushed into existence by anxiety. This is why certainty, though comforting, ultimately limits you. It keeps you living within the boundaries of what you already understand. Uncertainty, when met with softness, allows you to grow beyond those boundaries. You do not need to know what is coming next to be aligned with what is coming next. You only need to stop fighting the fact that you do not yet know. There is a quiet confidence that emerges when you accept uncertainty without resistance. It is not loud or dramatic. It does not announce itself as courage. It simply feels like steadiness in the midst of the unknown. From that steadiness, better questions arise. More honest actions emerge. More meaningful opportunities become visible. Not because the unknown suddenly disappeared, but because you stopped treating it as a threat. Life does not require you to have everything figured out. It requires you to be available to what is unfolding. Availability comes from openness. Openness comes from relaxation. Relaxation comes from not insisting that certainty must come first. This is not about surrendering your agency. It is about using it wisely. Choosing not to resist uncertainty is an active choice. It is the choice to remain present rather than reactive, to remain curious rather than controlling, to remain open rather than closed. When you make this choice, repeatedly and gently, you begin to notice that reality meets you differently. Not always with immediate answers, but with timely ones. Not always with clear maps, but with reliable steps. The field of potential opens not when you are certain, but when you are receptive. And receptivity is not something you force. It is something you allow by softening your grip on how things must be. You do not need to be sure to move forward. You do not need guarantees to be safe. You do not need answers to be aligned. You only need to stop resisting the not knowing long enough to let something new reach you. That is not weakness. That is wisdom earned through experience. When you stop demanding certainty, life is no longer confined to the limits of your expectations. It becomes responsive, creative, and surprisingly supportive. Not because you believed blindly, but because you allowed consciousness to soften. And in that softness, possibility finally has room to breathe. Tonight, you do not need to do anything more. Tonight, there is nothing left for you to fix, nothing you need to figure out, nothing that requires your effort or your belief to be pushed into place, because this moment is not asking you to understand your life or solve yourself. It is simply asking you to rest inside it. The kind of rest that is not an escape, not a collapse, but a quiet agreement with your own humanity, an acknowledgement that you have carried enough for now, and that laying down is not a failure of intention, but an act of wisdom earned through experience. You do not need to review the day again. You do not need to replay the conversations or measure your progress or check whether you did enough. Understanding can wait. Belief can soften. Effort can release its grip. All that is asked of you tonight is to lie down and allow your body to learn a different rhythm, one that is not driven by survival, not shaped by vigilance, not fueled by the need to prove or protect, but guided by the quiet recognition that you are allowed to be supported, a rhythm where breathing does not feel like a task, where the muscles no longer hold themselves together out of habit, where the nervous system begins to remember what it feels like to not be on guard. The older version of you learned to feel real through struggle. It learned to measure worth through effort. It learned to stay alert because alertness once meant safety. That version did what it had to do. and it deserves respect rather than rejection, because it carried you through seasons when softness was not an option, and when endurance was the only language the world seemed to understand. But the version of you that is emerging now understands something simpler and deeper. It understands that ease is not indulgence. It is not laziness. It is not the absence of meaning. Ease is your natural state when resistance no longer has a job to perform. This newer awareness does not demand that you abandon responsibility or stop caring. It simply asks you to stop equating suffering with truth. It invites you to consider that life does not need to hurt in order to be real, and that growth does not require constant tension to be valid. If you are tired tonight, that tiredness is not a verdict on your progress. It is a sign that something inside you has been working deeply, quietly, rearranging old structures, questioning long-held assumptions, and loosening patterns that no longer belong to who you are becoming. Fatigue is often the companion of transition, not because you failed, but because you have outgrown what you were carrying. You have not arrived late to your life. You have not taken a wrong turn that needs to be corrected. You are not behind schedule, because the schedule you have been measuring yourself against was never aligned with your inner timing in the first place. You are exactly where you need to be, standing at a threshold where holding on feels heavier than letting go, where effort begins to cost more than it gives, and where the quiet option of surrender starts to make more sense than the familiar habit of pushing. This threshold does not require courage in the dramatic sense. It requires honesty. The honesty to admit that forcing yourself forward no longer works, that striving has lost its effectiveness, and that something gentler, something more intelligent, is asking to take the lead. Letting go here does not mean you stop caring about your life. It means you stop carrying it alone. When you allow yourself to rest without justification, something subtle but significant happens. The system that has been on high alert begins to stand down. The body receives the message that it does not need to be ready for impact. The mind loosens its grip on control, not because it has given up, but because it trusts that it does not need to supervise every outcome. This is not passive. It is deeply active in a way that does not exhaust you. As you settle into sleep tonight, imagine nothing dramatic, nothing symbolic, nothing that requires effort. Simply allow the idea that something within you knows how to recalibrate without your involvement. The way the body knows how to heal a wound when it is finally left alone, the way the heart finds a steadier rhythm when it is no longer startled by its own beating. Sleep is not an interruption to growth. It is one of its most intelligent expressions. While you sleep, your system integrates what you have lived. It organizes what you have learned. It releases what no longer fits. You do not need to manage this process. You never did. There may not be fireworks when you wake. There may not be a clear sign that something has changed. What you may notice instead is quieter, a slight lightness, a subtle shift in how you meet the day, a reduced urgency, a softer edge to your thoughts, a sense that you are not bracing in the same way. These are not small changes. They are foundational ones. Transformation rarely announces itself loudly. It often arrives as a change in baseline, a gentle reorientation that alters how you experience everything without demanding attention for itself. Over time, these shifts compound, and one day you realize that life no longer feels like something you are enduring, but something you are participating in with less resistance. If tonight you feel the urge to do one more thing, to think one more thought, to make one more adjustment, notice that impulse with kindness and let it pass. That impulse comes from the old pattern that believed effort was always required. You do not need to obey it anymore. Tonight is not about becoming someone else. It is about allowing yourself to stop being who you had to be. Lie down. Let the day loosen its hold. Let your breathing find its own pace. Let the weight of responsibility rest somewhere other than your chest. You are not stepping away from your life by resting. You are stepping into it differently. The system is updating, not because you demanded change, but because you allowed space for it to occur. This update does not erase who you have been. It integrates what you have learned into something more sustainable, more aligned, more humane. There is nothing you need to carry into tomorrow. Accept yourself as you are right now, without performance, without explanation, without urgency. Sleep, let go. Trust that what is reorganizing beneath the surface does not need your supervision. When you wake, You may still have questions. You may still have responsibilities. But you will meet them from a slightly different place. One that is less defended, less strained, and more open to being supported. That is enough for tonight. Rest now. Everything that needs to continue will do so without your effort. And everything that needs to change has already begun.